I need to get this out because I'm still processing what happened, and honestly, I need to know if I went too far or if this was justified. You guys are going to have opinions. I know that much. So here's the setup. I've been married to Crystal for 6 years. Met her when we were both 24, got married at 26, and honestly, for the first couple years, things were decent. Not perfect, but what marriage is. Her family, though, that's been the problem from day one. Her dad, Ronnie, owns a construction supply business. Her mom, Angela, comes from old money. And they live in this massive house in the suburbs that they never let you forget cost them 7 figures. Her sister, Delilah, married some finance guy who works in the city, and her brother Otis just got promoted to senior manager at some tech firm. Me? I work in inventory management for a distribution center. I make about 40K a year. Not great, not terrible for where we live, but to Crystal's family, I might as well be unemployed. They've made that clear since the engagement party when Ronnie pulled me aside and told me he hoped I had plans to do better than warehouse work. I told him it was logistics coordination, not warehouse work, and he just laughed and walked away. Crystal and I used to be on the same page about her family. She'd roll her eyes when her mom made comments about our apartment being small, or when her dad would ask if I'd thought about going back to school. But something changed about 2 years ago. She started spending more time with them, started making comments about my job herself, started mentioning her ex more often, this guy named Brandon, who apparently just bought a beach house in Delaware and drives a Tesla. The dinner thing happens every month. Her whole family gets together at Ronnie and Angela's place. I'm expected to show up and smile while they talk about their vacations and investments and whatever else wealthy people talk about. This past Saturday was supposed to be like all the others. We drove over in my 2015 Toyota, which Crystal spent the whole ride complaining about because the AC doesn't work great anymore, and apparently Delilah just got a brand new SUV. We got there around 6, the usual setup, everyone in the living room with drinks before dinner. Delilah was showing off photos from their trip to Italy. Otis was talking about his new place downtown. I was sitting there nodding along, drinking the beer I brought because I learned years ago not to touch their expensive stuff without permission. Crystal was laughing at all her brother's jokes, being more animated than she'd been with me in months. Around 7, Angela said dinner was almost ready and asked Crystal to come help her in the kitchen. Delilah went with them. I stayed in the living room with Ronnie and Otis, half watching some game on their massive TV. Ronnie was telling Otis about some deal he was working on, not even pretending I was part of the conversation. After about 10 minutes, I realized I needed to use the bathroom. Their house is huge, 3 floors, and the closest bathroom to the living room is right off the hallway that leads past the kitchen. I walked down that hallway, and that's when I heard Crystal's voice coming from the kitchen. The door was open just a crack, and I could see them all in there. Crystal and her mom and sister standing around the island while Angela stirred something on the stove. Crystal was saying how she couldn't do this anymore, how every time I touched her she felt disgusted. She said, "Look at him. He's going bald at 32. He's got a gut growing. He makes 40K like it's something to be proud of." Her sister actually cackled, like literally laughed out loud and said, "Remember when you thought he'd be successful? Remember when you said he had potential?" Angela sighed and said, "Honey, we warned you about marrying beneath you. We told you this would happen." I just stood there in that hallway, frozen, listening to my wife of 6 years tell her family how disgusting I was to her. Then Ronnie's voice joined in from somewhere I couldn't see. He said the boy can't even change his own oil. What kind of man is that? What kind of man can't do basic work on a car? Crystal said 6 years wasted. Brandon just bought a beach house. I could have had that life. Otis laughed and said maybe we should start a GoFundMe. Help the loser pay his bills. They all laughed. All of them. My wife, her parents, her siblings, laughing about me. I walked back to the living room, sat back down on their leather couch. Ronnie came back in and asked if I wanted another beer. I said no thanks. We sat there for another 10 minutes until Angela called us in for dinner. The dining room table was set like always, fancy placemats and cloth napkins, and 3 different forks per person. I sat in my usual spot, Crystal next to me. Angela brought out the food, some kind of roast with potatoes and vegetables. Everyone started passing dishes around. Normal family dinner, right? Then Angela smiled at me, that sweet fake smile she does, and asked, "So how's that little job of yours going? Any chance of advancement?" I said it's going fine. Ronnie smirked and said, "Ever think about real work? Maybe construction? We could always use people willing to do manual labor." Delilah laughed into her wine glass. Crystal put her hand on mine and said, "Don't worry, baby. Not everyone can be ambitious. Some people are just meant for simple lives." The whole table snickered. Every single one of them, looking at me like I was entertainment. I put my fork down, stood up. Crystal asked where I was going. I didn't say anything, just walked out of that dining room through their massive foyer, out their front door, got in my car and drove home. My phone started blowing up before I even hit the highway. Crystal calling. Then her mom. Then her sister. I didn't answer any of them. When I got home, I started making moves. See, here's what Crystal and her family never bothered to learn about me. My parents died when I was 23, car accident, and they left me everything. Their house, their savings, their life insurance. I sold the house and invested most of it. Not in anything fancy, just boring index funds and some dividend stocks. Been adding to it for 9 years, living below my means while Crystal spent her salary on clothes and dinners out with her friends. The apartment we live in, I own it. Bought it cash 4 years ago, but kept it in just my name because Crystal had student loans at the time, and we didn't want them attached to the property. The car she drives, the nice one she takes to work, title's in my name. I bought it for her birthday 2 years ago. Our joint checking account where her paychecks go, I'm the primary account holder. I set it up when we got married. I spent 3 hours that night making phone calls and filling out forms online. Canceled her credit card that I'd added her to as an authorized user. Transferred all but $100 out of the joint checking into my personal account. Sent an email to the apartment building management, changing the locks and removing her from the lease. Filed a police report for emotional abuse to create a paper trail. Contacted a divorce attorney my buddy recommended. By midnight, everything I could do online was done. I'd have to go in person Monday morning to finish the rest. The banging on my door started at 3 a.m. I was still awake, sitting in the dark living room, when I heard Crystal's voice screaming my name, then her mother's voice, then her father's. All of them out in the hallway of my building making a scene. I opened the door. All 5 of them were standing there. Crystal looked like she'd been crying for hours, makeup running down her face. Angela was in her pajamas. Ronnie looked like he wanted to hit me. Delilah and Otis were both holding their phones up like they were ready to call someone. Crystal started screaming, "What did I do? What did I do to her?" Her mom was yelling about how she couldn't access any of their accounts. Her dad said I'd better fix this right now or there would be consequences. My wife kept repeating that everything's gone, all her money's gone. She can't get into the apartment, her car won't start. I looked at all 5 of them standing in my hallway at 3 a.m. The same 5 people who'd spent the evening mocking me to each other and to my face. And I smiled. I told them we'd talk in the morning. Then I closed the door and locked it. They banged and yelled for another 20 minutes before building security made them leave. It's been 3 days now, and my phone has 247 missed calls. Crystal's family has been posting on social media about what an abusive husband I am. Her friends have been messaging me, calling me every name in the book. My own friends are split, half saying I did what I had to do, half saying I went nuclear over a bad dinner conversation. But here's what I keep coming back to. 6 years. 6 years of subtle digs and comments and being treated like I wasn't good enough. 6 years of family dinners where I was the punchline. 6 years of my wife pretending to love me while telling her family I disgusted her. And I'm supposed to what? Just take it? Just keep playing the role of the failure husband while they all laugh behind my back? So Reddit, am I wrong here? Did I overreact? Or did they get exactly what they'd been asking for this whole time? I'll update when more develops because something tells me this is far from over. Update 1. Okay, so the response to my last post was insane. Over 3,000 comments and my inbox is destroyed. Shout out to everyone who said I should have done this years ago. You're absolutely right, and we'll get to that. Also to the person who said this sounds fake because nobody keeps financial secrets that well. I promise you, my wife's family thinks anyone making under 6 figures is basically homeless, so they never ask questions. It's been a week since the dinner. A week since I walked out and burned their world down. And guys, it's gotten so much worse, but also so much better, if that makes sense. I'm going to try to walk you through everything that's happened because there's a lot and it's all connected to why Crystal and her family are the way they are. Monday morning, I had to go into work. I work inventory management at a distribution center, which means I'm there at 7 a.m. most days, doing counts and coordinating shipments. I pulled into the parking lot at 6:45, and Crystal's car was sitting right there in the spot next to mine. Except it wasn't running because, like I mentioned, I'd disabled it remotely through the app. It's one of those newer models with all the connected features. Crystal was sitting in the driver's seat. She'd been waiting for me. When I parked, she got out and came straight over to my door before I could even get my seatbelt off. She looked awful. Same clothes from 3 days ago, hair a mess, face all puffy from crying. She started talking before I was even fully out of the car. She needed to talk to me. She needed me to understand. What I heard at dinner wasn't what it sounded like. Her family has expectations, and sometimes she vents to them, but she doesn't mean it. She loves me. She's always loved me. This is all a misunderstanding. I locked my car and started walking toward the building. She followed me across the parking lot, talking the whole time, saying how her mom was just trying to be helpful with the career advice, How her dad jokes around rough but doesn't mean anything by it. How Delilah was just teasing. How Otis has a bad sense of humor. How the stuff about Brandon was nothing, just comparing life paths, not saying she wanted to be with him. I stopped walking and looked at her. I asked her to repeat what she said in the kitchen. The exact words. She couldn't do it. Started crying instead and saying she was venting. She was frustrated. Everyone complains about their spouse sometimes. I asked if everyone tells their family they're disgusted when their husband touches them. She said I was twisting her words. We stood there in the parking lot of my work for 20 minutes. Her trying to explain away 6 years of feeling like garbage. Me just listening because honestly, I wanted to hear how she'd justify it. And you know what the core of her explanation was? Her family expected her to marry someone successful, someone with a future. When we met, I was in college finishing my degree and she thought I'd go into management or start my own business. When I took the inventory job, she thought it was temporary. But years went by and I stayed there and her family kept asking when I'd do better, and she didn't know what to tell them. So she started complaining about me to make them feel better about her choice. Started acting like I was the problem instead of their expectations. Started believing her own complaints until she actually did feel disgusted when I touched her. Her words, not mine. She said it like it was my fault for not being ambitious enough to keep her attracted to me. I told her the car stays disabled until the divorce is final. She asked what divorce. I said the one my attorney filed Friday afternoon. She started screaming in the parking lot, saying, I can't do this, we're married. You don't just leave over one bad night. I told her it wasn't one night, it was 6 years. And I walked inside. She couldn't follow me past security. The comments on my last post kept asking why I never noticed how bad it was. Truth is, I did notice. About 2 years ago when Crystal started spending every weekend at her parents' house. When she stopped wanting to have friends over to our place because it was too small. When she started making comments about other couples we knew who were doing better financially. I noticed all of it, and I started preparing. Moved more money into accounts she didn't know about. Made sure all our major assets were in my name alone. Kept records of every degrading comment. I wasn't planning to use it unless I had to, but Saturday night when I stood in that hallway listening to them laugh, I knew it was time. Tuesday, her father showed up at my work. Ronnie, the construction supply guy with more money than sense. He waited until my lunch break and caught me walking to my car. Big guy, probably 6'2", used to being the most important person in every room. He did that thing where he put his hand on my shoulder like we were buddies and said we needed to talk man to man. He steered me over to his truck and we stood there in the parking lot while he gave me his whole speech. His daughter made a mistake. She said things she shouldn't have. But marriage is about forgiveness. It's about working through hard times. He and Angela have been married 35 years and they've had their share of fights. This is just a rough patch. I asked him about the GoFundMe comment. He laughed and said that was just Otis being Otis. The kid's got a mouth on him, but doesn't mean harm. I asked about him calling me boy and asking what kind of man can't change his own oil. He said he was just busting my chops, trying to motivate me to learn some practical skills. I asked about Angela saying they warned Crystal about marrying beneath her. He got quiet for a second and then said, look, they wanted what was best for their daughter, and I had to understand where they were coming from. Where they were coming from. Like, it's reasonable to spend 6 years treating your son-in-law like hired help, because he doesn't make enough money. I asked Ronnie how much he thought I made. He said Crystal told them about $40K. I asked him how much he thought the apartment was worth. He didn't know I owned it, thought we were renting. His face, when I told him I bought it cash 4 years ago, was worth everything. Then I told him about the investment accounts, the dividend income, the net worth I'd built up over 9 years of living below my means while his daughter spent her whole salary on maintaining appearances for his family. By the end of it, Ronnie looked like he'd been hit with a brick. He actually asked why I never said anything about having money. I told him because people like him only respect money and I didn't need his respect. I needed to know who my wife really was. And now I knew. He didn't have much to say after that. Just told me I was making a mistake and walked back to his truck. Wednesday is when Angela got involved. Crystal's mom, the one with old money and opinions about everything. She found me at the grocery store near my place. I still don't know how she knew I'd be there, but she was waiting by the entrance when I walked in. She's this tiny woman, maybe 5'3", but she's got that energy like she's used to people doing what she says. She asked if we could talk while I shopped. I said fine. She followed me through the produce section talking about how she and Ronnie raised their children to value honesty and hard work, how they never meant to make me feel unwelcome, how family is the most important thing and we needed to work this out. I was picking out apples while she talked. I asked her why she asked about my little job at dinner. She said she was making conversation. I asked her why she sighed about Crystal marrying beneath her. She said I misheard. I asked her why she and her whole family thought it was okay to mock me in their kitchen while I was a guest in their house. She said they weren't mocking me. They were having a private conversation that I wasn't supposed to hear. That's what she said. I wasn't supposed to hear it. Like, that makes it better. Like, saying horrible things about someone is fine as long as they don't know about it. I asked Angela how long they'd been having private conversations about what a disappointment I was. She wouldn't answer. Just kept saying we needed to think about Crystal, about how hard this was for her, about how she was staying with them now and sleeping in her childhood bedroom and crying all the time. I told Angela that Crystal could stay in her childhood bedroom permanently for all I cared, that I was done being the family joke. Angela's face changed then, got cold. She said I was being vindictive and cruel, that I was punishing Crystal for being honest about her feelings, that taking away her money and her car and her home was financial abuse, that they could have me charged. I told her to call the police then. Report me for removing my wife from my accounts and my property. See how that goes. She didn't like that, told me I'd regret this and walked away. Here's what I'm learning through all these conversations. Crystal's family isn't just wealthy, they're the kind of wealthy where they think money equals worth as a human being. Ronnie built his business from nothing and thinks that makes him better than people who work for others. Angela inherited her money and thinks that makes her better than people who had to earn it. They raise their kids to believe that success is the only thing that matters and anyone not successful is less than. Crystal absorbed all of that, married me, thinking I'd become successful, and when I didn't, she started resenting me, started seeing me through their eyes, started believing I was worthless because I was happy making 40K and living a simple life. The disgust she felt wasn't really about me being bald or having a gut. It was about me not being what she needed me to be to impress her family. And you know what the worst part is? I don't even feel bad about what I'm doing to her. All these people commenting about how I went too far, how I should have just left quietly. You don't get it. They made me feel like nothing for 6 years. Crystal let them. Participated in it. Laughed about me behind my back while smiling to my face. And I'm supposed to just walk away and let them keep going on like nothing happened? Thursday, Crystal figured out I'd filed for divorce. She showed up at my building again but couldn't get past the new locks or security. She called me 47 times in 4 hours. Left voicemails saying she was going to fight this. I couldn't just throw away 6 years. She had rights as my wife. Then her attorney called my attorney. Apparently, they're going to argue I abandoned her without support and try to get temporary spousal support during the divorce process. My attorney laughed. Said good luck proving abandonment when she's got a full-time job and is living with her wealthy parents. Said good luck proving she needs support when we can show she was spending her entire salary on discretionary purchases while I covered all our living expenses. Said they'd have to explain in court why she felt entitled to my money when she spent 6 years telling her family I was disgusting and worthless. Friday afternoon, Delilah left me a voicemail. Crystal's sister, the one who cackled about me having potential. She said I needed to stop being dramatic and think about what I was doing to the family. That Crystal made a mistake, but families forgive mistakes. That their parents were devastated watching their daughter go through this. That I was tearing apart a family that had welcomed me. I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. It's Friday night now, and I'm sitting in my apartment alone, eating pizza, and reading through comments on my first post. Someone asked if I was prepared for Crystal's family to fight dirty. Yeah, I am. I've been prepared since the day I heard them laughing in that kitchen. Another person asked if I felt guilty. No, not even a little bit. A few people said I should try counseling. Why would I go to counseling to fix a relationship with someone who's disgusted by me? The divorce is going to take months. Crystal's fighting it, which means we're going to court. Her family is circling the wagons trying to figure out how to spin this. And I'm just getting started making them understand what they lost. I'll update again when the next round starts because something tells me this is about to get way more complicated. Update 2. Holy hell, you guys. The comments on my last update were wild. Over 5,000 this time, and people are really divided on whether I'm justified or just being vindictive. To the person who said I sound too calm to be going through a divorce, trust me, I'm not calm. I'm just focused. And to everyone asking if this is real because no one keeps financial secrets like this, welcome to what happens when your in-laws think you're too poor to have anything worth hiding. It's been 3 weeks since I walked out of that dinner. 3 weeks since I heard my wife call me disgusting while her family laughed. The divorce is in progress, and Crystal's attorney is making noise about temporary support, but my lawyer says it's going nowhere. What I didn't expect was how many new problems would spawn from this situation. Let me start with what happened 2 Mondays ago. I was at the distribution center doing a shipment coordination when Otis showed up. Crystal's brother, the senior manager at some tech firm who thought a GoFundMe joke was funny, he came right into the warehouse area looking for me, which you're not supposed to do without checking in, but he walked past the front desk like he owned the place. He found me in the back section where we keep overflow inventory. Big guy, like his dad, maybe 6'1", wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than I make in a month. He had this whole energy like he was about to solve all my problems if I just listened to reason. He said we needed to talk, not as family, as men. He got that I was upset. He understood why I felt disrespected. But Crystal was falling apart and their parents were losing sleep over this, and the whole family was suffering because of one bad night. He said, look, man to man, you made your point. You scared everyone. Now it's time to be the bigger person and work this out. I kept scanning inventory while he talked. He followed me down the aisle talking about how he knew what it was like to feel underestimated, how when he started at his company people doubted him, how he had to prove himself, how maybe I felt like I had something to prove too and this was my way of doing it. He said he got it. He really did. But this wasn't the way. I asked him if he got why the GoFundMe comment was messed up. He laughed and said, come on, that was just brother-in-law banter, giving you a hard time. I asked if he thought financial humiliation was banter. He said I was being sensitive, that guys bust each other's chops, and if I couldn't handle some ribbing, maybe that was part of the problem. Part of the problem. Like 6 years of mockery is just me being too sensitive to handle guy talk. I asked Otis how much student loan debt he had when he graduated. He said none. His parents paid for school. I asked him how much they helped with his first apartment. He said they covered the deposit and first few months' rent. I asked him if he thought maybe it was easier to be successful when your parents bankroll your start in life. He didn't like that. Said he worked hard for everything he had. I asked if Crystal worked hard or if she just married the wrong guy according to their family standards. He said Crystal loved me, but I wasn't making it easy for her to defend that choice to them. That every family dinner where I showed up in my old clothes, driving my old car, and talking about my warehouse job made her look bad. That she was trying to make the best of a situation where her husband wasn't living up to his potential. I stopped scanning and looked at him, told him to get out of my workplace. He said we weren't done talking. I said yeah, we were, and if he didn't leave, I'd call security. He left, but not before saying I was making the biggest mistake of my life and Crystal deserved better than this. That same week, I found out what Crystal's been telling people. Remember how in my last update I mentioned her friends were messaging me calling me names? Turns out Crystal's been on social media, and to anyone who'll listen saying I drained all her accounts without warning, that I stole her car, that I locked her out of her home and left her with nothing, that I'm financially abusing her because she told me she was unhappy in the marriage. She's not mentioning the dinner, not mentioning 6 years of being mocked, not mentioning that every account she's crying about was mine that I'd added her to, not mentioning that the car was a gift in my name that I let her use, not mentioning that the apartment is mine that she never paid a dime toward, just telling everyone I'm an abusive husband who punished her for being honest about her feelings. I found out because my coworker Andy pulled me aside Wednesday morning. He'd seen posts from mutual friends we had with Crystal, posts talking about financial abuse and controlling behavior and how they couldn't believe I'd do this to her. Andy asked me straight up if I hit Crystal or threatened her, or any of that because the post made it sound really bad. I had to explain the whole situation to him. The dinner, the mockery, the family that treated me like garbage for 6 years, all of it. Andy knows me. We've worked together for 4 years, and he said that didn't sound like me, but he had to ask. Then he asked if I had any proof of what really happened. I don't. That's the thing. I don't have recordings of the kitchen conversation. I don't have text where Crystal admits to mocking me. I just have 6 years of memories and the knowledge that I was right to leave. But Crystal's out there controlling the narrative and making me look like a monster. Thursday, I made the decision to start telling my side. Not on social media because I'm not playing that game, but to the people who matter. I reached out to the few mutual friends we had and explained what really happened. Most believed me. A couple said they'd suspected Crystal wasn't happy but didn't know it was this bad. One of them, this girl named Bonnie, who Crystal knew from college, said she wasn't surprised because Crystal had always been status conscious. Bonnie told me something I didn't know. Back in college, Crystal dated a guy from a wealthy family. They broke up because he graduated and moved across the country for a job, and Crystal didn't want long distance. She spent the next 2 years comparing every guy she dated to him. When she met me, she thought I was pre-law because of some misunderstanding at a party. By the time she found out I was studying supply chain management, we'd been dating 3 months and she really did like me, so she stuck with it. But she always had this idea I'd level up, that I'd go into management or start a consulting business or something bigger than inventory coordination. When that didn't happen, she started resenting me. Bonnie said Crystal used to complain about it at girls' nights out, how she loved me but wished I had more ambition, how her family kept asking when I'd get a better job, how she felt stuck between her family's expectations and her commitment to me. This is what I'm dealing with. A wife who spent 6 years resenting me for not becoming someone I never claimed to be, while her family reinforced every negative feeling until she actually became disgusted by me. And now that I've left, she's playing the victim. Last Friday, Crystal showed up at my building again. Not alone this time. She brought Angela and Delilah, three of them standing in the lobby, trying to convince the security guard to let them up. When that didn't work, they called me from the lobby phone. I went down. Don't ask me why, I guess I wanted to face all three of them. They were standing there by the elevators, Crystal in the middle looking exhausted, her mom and sister flanking her like bodyguards. Angela started talking immediately. Said we needed to stop this nonsense and sit down like adults. That they'd booked a table at a restaurant nearby, and we were all going to have dinner and talk through this properly. That Crystal was willing to apologize for what I overheard, and they were willing to start fresh if I'd just give them a chance. I asked if Ronnie and Otis were at this restaurant too. Angela said no, just us. They thought maybe it would be better without the men. I asked if this was the same restaurant where they'd spend dinner mocking me. Delilah said I needed to stop being dramatic about one bad conversation. One bad conversation. That's what they'd decided it was. One unfortunate moment that I was blowing out of proportion. I asked Crystal directly if she thought it was just one bad conversation. She said she didn't know what I wanted her to say. That yes, she'd said things she shouldn't have, but she was venting to her family and I wasn't supposed to hear it and couldn't. I understand that people say things in private they don't mean. Didn't mean. She looked me in the eye and said she didn't mean it when she called me disgusting. When she said she wasted 6 years. When she laughed about me with her whole family. Just didn't mean any of it. I asked her why she said it then. She said because her family was pressuring her about us. Because her mom kept asking when I'd get promoted. Because her dad kept making comments about me not being handy. Because Delilah and Otis kept talking about their successful spouses. Because she felt defensive and lashed out at me instead of at them. So it was their fault she mocked me. It was their pressure that made her call me disgusting. It was everyone's fault but hers. I asked Angela if she thought pressuring her daughter about her marriage for 6 years was appropriate. Angela said they were concerned parents who wanted the best for their child. I asked Delilah if she thought cackling about me having potential was sisterly love. Delilah said I was twisting everything to make them look bad. We stood in that lobby for 45 minutes. The three of them tag-teaming reasons why I should forgive this. Why I should come to dinner and talk it out. Why I should stop the divorce and give Crystal another chance. Angela even said she'd make sure the family backed off and stopped commenting on my career. Like that was some generous offer I should be grateful for. I told them no. No dinner, no fresh start, no chance. Crystal made her feelings clear and her family spent 6 years reinforcing those feelings. I was done being the disappointment husband. They could go have dinner without me. Crystal started crying. Not quiet tears, full-on sobbing in the lobby. Saying she couldn't do this anymore. She couldn't live with her parents at 32. She couldn't keep explaining to people why her marriage fell apart. She needed me to stop punishing her. Angela put her arm around Crystal and told me I should be ashamed of myself for doing this to her daughter. I left them in the lobby and went back upstairs. This past Monday, the real legal pressure started. Crystal's attorney filed a motion claiming I abandoned the marital home and requesting I be required to maintain her standard of living during the divorce proceedings. They're arguing that because I removed her access to accounts and transportation, I've created an undue hardship. They want me to pay for her to get her own apartment and her own car while the divorce is pending. My attorney says it's a reach, that you can't abandon a home you solely own by removing someone else from it. That Crystal has a full-time job making about $55K a year and is currently living rent-free with her wealthy parents, so there's no hardship. That every asset they're claiming I took away was mine to begin with, but it's still going to court and we still have to fight it. Tuesday, Crystal showed up at the distribution center again. Security stopped her at the door this time, but she stood in the parking lot for an hour holding a sign, an actual sign. It said, "Financial abuse is real," and had some website about domestic violence resources. Cars driving by were slowing down to look. My coworkers were coming to ask me what was going on. My supervisor had to come out and tell her she was on private property and needed to leave. She left, but not before shouting loud enough for everyone to hear that I stole everything from her and left her homeless. That I was punishing her for being honest. That I was an abuser hiding behind legalities. Then she drove away in a car I didn't recognize. Andy asked me about it after. I told him she was escalating because the legal route wasn't working. He asked if I felt bad at all. Honest question from a friend. I told him no. That every time I started to feel guilty, I remembered standing in that hallway, listening to them laugh about me. That every time Crystal cried about losing her standard of living, I remembered her comparing me to Brandon and his beach house. The thing nobody seems to get is that I'm not doing this to Crystal. I'm doing this for me. I spent 6 years being what she needed, while she spent 6 years resenting me for it. 6 years of family dinners where I smiled through their mockery. 6 years of trying to be enough for someone who told her family I disgusted her. And everyone wants me to feel bad that I finally walked away. Wednesday, Ronnie called me. First time I'd heard from him since our parking lot conversation. He said they'd tried to do this the nice way. They'd tried to talk to me, reason with me, give me a chance to fix this. But I was being stubborn and vindictive, and he wasn't going to watch his daughter suffer anymore. He said I had 1 week to restore Crystal's access to the accounts and the car, or he'd make sure I regretted it. I asked him how he planned to do that. He said he had connections, that he knew people who could make my life very difficult, that I should think real carefully about who I was messing with. I told him if he was threatening me, he should be more specific. He said he wasn't threatening. He was warning. There's a difference. I called my attorney after. She said document everything. Save the voicemails, the messages, any contact they make. She said if Ronnie does anything that could be considered harassment or intimidation, we file a restraining order. She also said Crystal's stunt at my workplace could be grounds for a harassment claim if she keeps it up. It's Wednesday night now, and I'm exhausted, not from the divorce process or the legal stuff, but from having to constantly defend myself to people who think I should have just let them keep mocking me. From Crystal's social media posts painting me as an abuser. From her family trying every angle to force me back into playing the failure husband. Someone in the comments on my last post said this would all blow over once Crystal accepted the divorce. Yeah, that's not happening. She's fighting this with everything she has because accepting it means accepting that she's not the victim, that she spent 6 years married to someone she looked down on and now has to face consequences for that. I'll update again after the court hearing next month because something tells me that's when things are really going to get interesting. Final update. All right, Reddit. This is probably going to be my last update because the main story is basically done. I know a lot of you have been following this saga and honestly the support has kept me going through some rough moments. Shout out to everyone who said I should stand my ground, you were right. And to the people saying I went too far, well, you're about to see exactly how far I was willing to go. It's been 2 months since I walked out of that dinner. 2 months since I heard my wife and her family laughing about what a disappointment I am. The divorce is moving forward, and the court hearing for Crystal's motion happened last week. But before I get to that, I need to tell you about everything that led up to it because the past month has been absolutely insane. 3 weeks ago, Ronnie made good on his threat about making my life difficult. He called my supervisor at work, told him he was a concerned family member worried about my mental state, said I'd been acting erratically, that I'd stolen from my wife, that I might be dangerous. My supervisor, Pete, is a good guy, been there 15 years, and he called me into his office to ask what was going on. I had to explain the whole situation again. Pete listened and then asked if I had any documentation. I showed him the police report I'd filed for emotional abuse. Showed him the attorney correspondence proving everything I took was legally mine. Showed him text messages from Crystal's family harassing me. Pete said he'd handle it and told me not to worry about it. What I didn't know until later was that Pete called Ronnie back. Told him that harassing an employee's workplace with false allegations could be considered defamation. That if Ronnie contacted the distribution center again about me, they'd be documenting it for legal purposes. Ronnie apparently hung up on him, but Ronnie didn't stop. He started calling my apartment building management, told them I was mentally unstable, that they should be concerned about having me as a tenant, that I might be a danger to other residents. The property manager called me in for a meeting. I brought my attorney this time. My attorney laid it out for them, showed them that I owned my unit outright, explained the divorce situation, explained that my soon-to-be ex-father-in-law was harassing me. The property manager apologized and said they'd document any further contact from Ronnie as harassment. My attorney said if it continued, we'd be filing a restraining order. That same week, Crystal ramped up her social media campaign, posted a long thing about financial abuse and controlling partners. Never mentioned my name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. Talked about how she'd married someone she thought loved her, only to discover he was monitoring and controlling every aspect of her financial life. How he'd trapped her by making her dependent on him and then cut her off without warning when she tried to have an honest conversation about their relationship. The post got shared hundreds of times. Her friends were commenting about how strong she was, how brave, how they'd always suspected something was off about me. I watched this happen in real time through mutual friends' accounts because I'd never posted about any of this publicly. I'd told my side to the people who mattered, but I hadn't put it on blast like she was doing. Then Bonnie, the college friend I mentioned before, did something I wasn't expecting. She commented on Crystal's post, said she was sorry Crystal was going through this, but maybe Crystal should tell the whole story, about how she'd spent 6 years complaining about me to anyone who'd listen, about how she'd called me boring and unambitious at girls' nights, about how she'd said multiple times she'd married the wrong person. Crystal deleted the comment. Bonnie posted it again. Then Bonnie made her own post saying she was tired of watching people play victim when they'd created their own problems. That post got shared too. Crystal's narrative started cracking. 2 weeks ago, Angela tried a different approach. She started calling my attorney directly, not through her daughter's attorney, just calling mine asking to speak with me. My attorney told her all communication needed to go through proper channels. Angela said she just wanted to talk mother to son-in-law, that surely we could have one conversation without lawyers involved. My attorney asked me if I wanted to take a call from Angela. I said absolutely not. That anything Angela wanted to say could be said through her daughter's attorney. My attorney told Angela that, and Angela apparently said I was being unreasonable and difficult, and they'd tried everything to make peace, but I was determined to destroy their family. Destroy their family. Like I was the one who'd spent 6 years mocking someone at family dinners. The court hearing was scheduled for last Thursday. Crystal's motion requesting I maintain her standard of living during the divorce proceedings. Her attorney had submitted a whole brief about how I'd systematically isolated and controlled her finances, how I'd made her dependent on me, and then removed all support when she expressed dissatisfaction with the marriage. My attorney submitted our response. Bank statements showing Crystal's conduct was suspending over the past 6 years. Credit card bills in her name showing luxury purchases. Proof that I'd paid for our apartment, our utilities, our groceries, while Crystal spent her entire $55K salary on clothes, restaurants, trips with friends. Proof that every account she claimed I drained was originally mine, that I'd added her to as a courtesy. Proof that the car was registered in my name, purchased by me, given to her as a gift. We also submitted the police report for emotional abuse, character statements from my coworkers, the documentation of Ronnie's harassment, phone records showing hundreds of calls from Crystal and her family, the recording from my building security of Crystal's lobby. Meltdown. Thursday morning, I met my attorney at the courthouse. I was wearing the same suit I'd worn to my wedding. Seemed appropriate somehow. We went through security and found the courtroom. Crystal was already there with her attorney. Angela and Ronnie were sitting behind her in the gallery. Delilah was there too, all of them dressed up, looking serious. Crystal saw me come in. She'd lost weight, looked tired. She was wearing this conservative dress I'd never seen before, probably borrowed from her mom. When our eyes met, she looked away fast. The hearing started. Crystal's attorney went first, gave this whole presentation about how devastating it is when a spouse weaponizes finances, how Crystal had trusted me to handle our money, and I'd used that trust to trap her, how she was now living with her parents at 32 because I'd left her with nothing, how she deserved temporary support while the divorce was pending so she could maintain the lifestyle she'd become accustomed to during the marriage. Then my attorney stood up. She walked the judge through everything methodically, showed that every asset was mine before the marriage, explained that I'd added Crystal to accounts as a gesture of trust that she'd abused, showed Crystal's spending patterns proving she'd contributed nothing to our household expenses, pointed out that Crystal earned $55K annually and was currently living rent-free with her wealthy parents, so there was no actual hardship. Then my attorney did something I wasn't expecting. She asked the judge for permission to question Crystal directly. The judge allowed it. Crystal had to stand up and answer questions under oath. My attorney asked Crystal to confirm she'd had full access to a joint checking account throughout the marriage. Crystal said yes. Asked if she'd ever been prevented from spending money. Crystal said no. Asked what she'd spent her salary on if I was paying all household expenses. Crystal said personal items and social activities. Asked if she'd ever told her family I was disgusting. Crystal hesitated and then said she'd vented during a difficult time but didn't mean it the way it sounded. My attorney asked Crystal to describe what happened the night I left. Crystal said we'd had a family dinner and I'd overheard a private conversation I wasn't meant to hear and overreacted. My attorney asked what was said in that private conversation. Crystal's attorney objected, but the judge wanted to hear it. Crystal had to stand there and admit in court what she'd said, how she'd called me disgusting, how she'd complained about my income and my appearance, how she'd compared me to her ex, how her family had joined in. She tried to spin it as just venting frustration, but my attorney kept pressing. Asked if she'd said 6 years were wasted. Crystal said yes. Asked if she'd laughed while her brother suggested a GoFundMe. Crystal said she didn't remember laughing. My attorney pulled out phone records, showed Crystal's texts to her friends over the past 2 years. There were dozens of messages complaining about me, calling me lazy and unmotivated, saying she'd made a mistake marrying me, saying she should have stayed with Brandon, saying her family was right about me all along. Crystal's attorney tried to object, but these were texts Crystal's friends had voluntarily provided after seeing her social media posts. Then my attorney did what she'd warned me she might do. She asked Crystal about her spending, asked her to explain why she'd spent $47,000 last year on discretionary purchases while claiming she couldn't afford her own place now, asked her to explain the designer purses and the expensive dinners and the weekend trips, Asked her why she felt entitled to maintain that lifestyle on my dime when she'd spent years calling me a disappointment. Crystal started crying on the stand. Her attorney asked for a recess. The judge allowed it. We all went out to the hallway. Angela immediately came over to my attorney trying to negotiate, saying they'd drop the motion if we'd agree to a quick, uncontested divorce with a small settlement. My attorney said no, that we were going to see this through. When we went back in, the judge had clearly made up his mind. He denied Crystal's motion completely, said there was no evidence of financial abuse or hardship, that Crystal had a job and family support and access to her own income throughout the marriage, that removing someone from your personal accounts after discovering they'd been disparaging you for years wasn't abuse. It was self-preservation. He said Crystal's lifestyle during the marriage was maintained by my generosity, not by any legal obligation, and that generosity had ended when the marriage ended. Then the judge said something I wasn't expecting. He said that based on the evidence presented, particularly Crystal's spending patterns and earning capacity versus mine, he saw no basis for any spousal support in the final divorce decree either. That Crystal had demonstrated she was capable of supporting herself and had chosen not to contribute to household expenses while married. That the marriage had been relatively short with no children and no commingling of premarital assets. Crystal's attorney tried to argue, but the judge shut it down. Said they could present different evidence if they had it. But based on what he'd seen today, this looked like a case of someone who'd taken financial advantage during a marriage and was now upset that advantage had ended. We left the courthouse. Crystal and her family went one direction. I went another. My attorney was actually smiling, said that went better than she'd expected. Said Crystal's attorney would probably push for settlement now because taking this to a full trial would just make things worse for them. That was 6 days ago. Since then, things have been quiet. No calls from Crystal's family, no social media posts, no showing up at my workplace. My attorney says Crystal's attorney reached out about settlement talks. They're willing to do an uncontested divorce with no support either direction and a clean split where we each keep what we brought into the marriage. Exactly what I wanted from the start. But I'm not signing yet because I found out something else, and I want Crystal to know that I know before this ends. Remember how I mentioned Crystal's friend Bonnie, who commented on her social media? Bonnie reached out to me privately after the court hearing. She'd seen the news spreading through mutual friends about how it went. She wanted to tell me something she thought I should know. Bonnie said that about 3 years ago, Crystal reconnected with Brandon on social media, the ex with the beach house. They'd been messaging on and off ever since. Nothing physical, according to Bonnie. Crystal had insisted they were just friends, but the amount she talked about him and compared me to him made Bonnie uncomfortable. Crystal had apparently told her friends she was staying with me until she figured out if there was a future with Brandon or someone like him. I was a placeholder. For 3 years, while I was paying for everything and trying to be a good husband, Crystal was keeping me around as a backup plan while she figured out if she could trade up. That's why she got so much worse 2 years ago. That's when Brandon bought the beach house and Crystal realized she'd married the wrong guy. I messaged Crystal directly for the first time since I left. Told her I knew about Brandon. Told her I knew I'd been a placeholder. Told her that's why I'm not settling yet. That I want her to live with this hanging over her for a while longer. That I want her to wonder what else I know and what else I might reveal in court if we go to trial. That I want her to feel like I felt standing in that hallway, listening to her laugh about me. She called me within 10 minutes, crying, begging me to not bring up Brandon in court, saying it wasn't what I thought, that they were just friends, that she'd never physically cheated, that she'd been confused but she'd never actually betrayed our marriage vows. I asked her if emotional betrayal counts. If spending 3 years planning your exit strategy while your husband pays for everything counts. She didn't have an answer for that. I told her I'd think about the settlement, that my attorney would be in touch. She asked me what I wanted. I told her I wanted her to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't treat someone like garbage for 6 years and then cry victim when they leave, that her family's money and status don't protect her from being held accountable. Yesterday, Angela called me. Not my attorney, me directly. My number's not blocked. I want to see who's trying to reach me. She said she needed to apologize, that she'd been wrong about me, that she hadn't understood how hard I was working to provide for Crystal, that she saw now that her family's pressure had damaged my marriage to her daughter, and she took responsibility for that. I asked her why she was apologizing now. She said because she saw me in that courtroom and realized I wasn't who she thought I was, that I'd been supporting her daughter while being disrespected, and she hadn't seen it. I asked her if she'd seen it, would she have acted differently? She said she didn't know, but she wanted to now. I told Angela the same thing I told Crystal, that I'd think about it, that the damage was done, and apologies don't undo 6 years. She said she understood and hung up. This morning, Ronnie showed up at the distribution center, Pete called me to the front because Ronnie insisted on talking to me. I went out there and Ronnie was standing in the lobby. He looked older somehow, tired. He said he wanted to talk man to man without lawyers or family around. We walked out to the parking lot. Ronnie said he'd underestimated me, that he'd thought I was just a warehouse guy who'd gotten lucky marrying his daughter, that he hadn't understood I'd been building something while living quietly. He said he respected that, and he respected how I'd handled myself through all this. He said if I'd just told him years ago that I had money, he would have treated me differently. I told Ronnie that was exactly the problem, that he only respected me now that he knew I had money, that for 6 years he'd treated me like garbage because he thought I was poor, that his respect was worthless because it was conditional on my bank account. He tried to argue, but he knew I was right. Then Ronnie asked me what he could do to make this right, said he'd pay whatever settlement I wanted if I'd agree to keep this quiet, that his family's reputation in their social circle had taken hits from Crystal's court hearing becoming public, that people were talking about how they'd treated me, and it was affecting his business relationships. He said name a number and he'd make it happen. I told him I didn't want his money, that I wanted him and his family to live with the consequences of their actions, that I wanted them to know they'd had someone good in their family and they'd driven him away because he didn't make enough money or drive the right car or have the right kind of job, that they'd valued status over character, and now everyone knew it. Ronnie left. He didn't threaten me this time, just got in his truck and drove away. It's Tuesday night now, and I'm sitting in my apartment eating leftover pizza and reading through 6,000 comments across all my posts. People asking if I'm going to settle, asking if I feel vindicated, asking if I regret any of this. I don't regret it. Not for a second. Crystal and her family spent 6 years teaching me that I wasn't good enough, that my job wasn't impressive enough, my money wasn't sufficient enough, my life wasn't ambitious enough. They made me feel small while taking everything I offered. And when I finally walked away, they tried to destroy me for it. Now they're the ones dealing with consequences. Crystal's living with her parents at 32, explaining to everyone why her marriage failed. Her family's social circle knows they mocked and belittled their son-in-law for years. Ronnie's business relationships are strained because people don't want to associate with someone who treats family like that. Angela's having to face that her daughter's marriage ended because of the pressure she put on it. I'm going to sign the settlement, not because they asked me to or because I feel bad, but because I'm done with them. The divorce will be final in a few months and I'll never have to see any of them again. Crystal can go find her Brandon or whoever else will give her the lifestyle she thinks she deserves. Her family can go back to their country club and their expensive dinners and their opinions about who's worthy of respect. And I'll go back to my inventory management job, making my $40K and living in my paid-off apartment with my investment portfolio and my peace of mind. Because turns out you can't mock someone for 6 years and then call them the bad guy for leaving. Turns out actions have consequences even when you're wealthy. Turns out standing in that hallway hearing them laugh was the best thing that ever happened to me because it showed me exactly who they were. So yeah, Reddit, that's where we are. The divorce is almost done. Crystal and her family are dealing with the fallout, and I'm moving on with my life knowing I handled this exactly how I should have. Thanks for following along and for all the support. You guys were right from the start. I deserve better than them.